Hello,
हेलो
uh,
वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा वाहिगुरु जी की फतेह
वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा वाहिगुरु जी की फतेह अमरजीत.
फतेह जी फतेह Today with me we have Sardar Inderjeet Singh of the Afghan Hindu and Sikhs fame, who is an eminent Sikh researcher and historian. Sir, welcome back to the Sikh Renaissance.
Thank you, Amarjit. Thanks for having me.
Yes, so the circumstances under which we are inviting you back again are, as you know, quite established at this rate, and they concern Professor Audrey Truschke's claims in her book on Aurangzeb that the Shahidi of Guru Tegh Bahadur, as per Sikh sources, is quite fictitious, probably fabricated to show Muslims in a bad light, and there are no contemporary sources for it. And as I understand, you actually sent her an email with evidence that there are contemporary non-Sikh sources for this martyrdom. Has she replied back yet?
No, she hasn't replied back. I mean, her book came in 2017, which, in a way, strangely coincided with my initial article, which I wrote for sicknet.com. But since after publishing my book in April 2019, I have been basically enhancing my previous articles, ensuring that the referencing is done in a proper manner, and going into some more details. So my article was published by article on the martyrdom of Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib was published by Institute of Sikh Studies, Chandigarh, and they have a journal called Abstract of Sikh Studies. So I sent that article, which was published in late 2019-20. No, it was published in 2021 by the Abstract of Sex Studies. So I sent that article basically saying there are plenty of multiple non-Sikh sources which mention the martyrdom of Guru Sahib. She hasn't replied back yet.
Do you expect any reply back?
Strictly speaking, I wasn't expecting a reply simply because uh, academics across abroad, they have a little or small opinion about non-academics like myself. So we are amateurs for them. Although the article may have been written in a professional style and the references are from the books or manuscripts which are well regarded. Now, I just got a out of office reply that she's on the sabbatical till September 2023. Yeah, that's the only thing I got here.
Okay, so moving on, even when you did write that article in the first place, as we understand, there were some allegations being made against the Guru's martyrdom by the Hindu Right, which was basically that Sikh sources have fictionalized the whole event. It didn't happen the way it did.
Yes. And that was the motivation to write the article initially in 2017. There was a very famous guy, I can't remember his name, but he was running this Twitter, probably not Twitter at that time, probably on the Facebook and on social media that he, everything about Hindu nationalism, but he also questioned that there is no proof. Specifically, he made two allegations that there's no proof that any Brahmins came to Guru Sahib to seek help. And secondly, there is no contemporary non Sikh source on the martyrdom of Guru Sahib. He got some support from a section of Hindu nationalists, but some of them also objected that he's taking it too far, that we should not question these kind of things. Uh, I posted my sources to him on his blog, and he didn't publish it. So in a way, I need to be thankful to him that prompted me to write an article on SickNet, and then eventually a proper journal article into 2021. Yeah.
But if we do look at the content of that article has been pretty much referenced so many times, quoted so many times, because basically the references and the sources you cite, they were accepted by prominent Sikh historians such as Dr. Ganda Singh, Dr. Fauja Singh, and even J.S. Garewal. All of them pretty much did accept those sources, particularly the Persian sources, if I'm correct.
Yes, and that's a little bit amazing and surprising thing that even, I mean, all these sources and the people you have named, Professor Ganda Singh, Dr. J.S. Garewal, Professor Fauja Singh, they wrote about all this matter around 1970s, mid 1970s. So this has been in the public domain close to 50 years, and still we are questioning these things. And on top of it, some of these Persian sources, like the Sojan Rai Pandari one, the Bhim Sen one, those were translated by Jadunath Sarkar before partition in 1930s and 1940s. So 80 years down the line, the sources are in the public domain and still people are questioning it. So this guy on social media, we can say, well, he's not into academics, but he tries to portray he knows everything. He has not learned. But how come a professor of American university has not searched them? He is not aware of them, which is very surprising.
It is very surprising because lying on my desk at the moment, right next to me, is a book by Andrew G. Boston, who's also a American-based Jewish academic, and the name of this book is Sharia versus Freedom: The Legacy of Islamic Totalitarianism. And it's quite amazing that within this book, he's actually cited several articles, and they too actually mention the martyrdom of Guru Tegh Bahadur. And this is quite amazing because they've actually cross-referenced it with other original accounts. So the fact that, I mean, I do know that if Audrey Truschke does listen to this episode, chances are she's going to dismiss it as being Islamophobic at the end of the day, because that seems to be her biggest resort to any criticism. And, with all due respect to her, I mean, especially after the Professor Goldman controversy, where she referenced alleged quote from Professor Goldman's translation of the Ramayana, where Sita calls Rama misogynist swine, but Goldman never had that line in his translation, so she got caught out. So we do know we're dealing with a academic with very shady credentials and practices. However, unfortunately, due to the cultural Marxist and leftist influence in universities, as long as there is a doctor or a professor attached to the front of the name, academics can get away with quite a lot. And that's what we are seeing worldwide today.
Sadly, that's true. And unfortunately, also, I personally feel that a Sikh academic, probably one of the chairs in the Western Hemisphere in Canada and America, there are quite a few Sikh chairs. They should take up this issue because they will have the credibility.
Yep.
What I was trying to say was that yes, this is true. Her credentials have been questioned. I mean, unfortunately, what happened was she got a lot of abuse, verbal abuse on the social media, and sometimes in the conference she spoke. So, in a way, she got a lot of sympathy from academia for free speech. So, that in a way clouded the matter. So, her if we had given a constructive criticism, her book would have been dismissed. But unfortunately, because she got a like a hollow of that, oh, she is fighting against fascism, and see, she's getting all the abuses from the fascist Hindu nationalists. But it was not like that. It was more to do with the fact that there's, that her analysis is faulty. She has not researched her book well. She hasn't done her homework.
Yep, that's quite right, but unfortunately, when the matter became a separate matter of abuse, I mean, I suppose you can say controversy sells, and for her, it sold quite a lot.
True, true. The book, I have been told, has sold about 25,000 copies. So you can see it has helped the publisher and her. Yeah.
Yep. So basically, if we do now move on, Guru Tegh Bahadur's martyrdom came at a very dark time for the subcontinent, and this is actually based on a whole retinue of Persian sources written at the time. We will only mention some of them, which is related to the Sikhs at least. So the events leading up to these martyrdom are quite important as well, because we have this image in our mind of a pacifist Guru Tegh Bahadur who spontaneously stood up for religious rights and was killed. But if you look at the history of Guru Tegh Bahadur, he was an established military commander. He had defeated Mughals before. So you can see that the state considered him quite a radical danger.
Yes, I think that is a true assessment. If we go a little bit further, back, Surjan Rai Pandari refers that Dara Shikoh was given a safe passage to move through the river Beas at Goindwal by the 2200 forces of Guru Har Rai Sahib.
Yep.
And when Aurangzeb became the emperor and he had killed all his brothers, this was allegedly reported to him, and that was the reason that he asked the next Guru, the Guru Har Krishan Sahib, because Guru Har Rai Sahib had passed away by then, to come and see him. In a way, he asked one of his courtiers to get him, and it was like, okay, if he doesn't come politely, then use force. So there is definitely a link that Aurangzeb wanted to interfere in Sikh matters. The thing is that I have not found any other source. Surjan Pandari is a good source, but if you ask me personally, there is no other contemporary source or any other source which says Guru Har Rai Sahib may have helped Dara Shikoh. But saying that, there's a possibility as Dara Shikoh does come in Sikh history. He was the governor of Lahore province, and Lahore province came under the area which was the seat of Guru Har Rai Sahib. So there were some interactions. So by the time Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib had been the Guru, Aurangzeb, his fascism had reached to an extent where jizya had been reimposed. There was a pilgrimage tax for Hindus to go to. Any non-Muslim going to their pilgrimage had to pay a tax to visit or to get emancipation from their religious sites. Then there were different duties. The duties for trade for a Muslim merchant was half that of a Hindu merchant. So by this time, he had crossed most boundaries of being a sensible, mature ruler. I find it very interesting that Professor Audrey has said, well, Aurangzeb should be judged by the times which he lived. He has been deemed as a fascist when he's not. Well, we can compare Aurangzeb with his own ancestors, Shah Jahan, Jahangir, Akbar, Humayun, and Babur. He was more extremist than all of them together. So her thesis, her book doesn't stack up. It's simply the controversy basically made it to be a bestseller.
I suppose when we do consider what Aurangzeb did, I mean, we can't really fit much in this episode because it's not really about how radical Islam influenced Aurangzeb. But if you do look at something, scholar S.D. Goitin, now this is quite a prominent scholar of Islam. This is something they mention about the jizya, which you mentioned, which is basically the jizya is a tax which individuals who don't convert to Islam have to pay to keep Islamic society going, and these individuals are known as dhimmis. So, just a few quotes from scholars down here to actually, establish what the circumstances were like for non-Muslims at that time, which is taxation by the Muslim government was merciless, and a very large section of the population must have permanently lived at the starvation level. One gets the impression that the poor were concerned more with getting money for the payment of their taxes than for food and clothing, for failure of payment usually induced cruel punishment. An Islamic State was part of or coincided with Dar al-Islam, the House of Islam. Its treasury was the money of the Muslims. So basically, what Goitin is saying is that in Islam, they view the world in two perceptions. There is the Dar al Islam, the House of Islam, and the Dar al Harb, the House of War. So, to quote another Muslim scholar, Abu Fatima, Islam teaches that other lands must be invaded simply because they're disbelievers, who are the worst oppressors, as disbelief is the worst oppression, and Islamic governance must be implemented in those lands. So basically, what we're seeing is that the local population, the non-Muslim population, is eventually being reduced in the name of religion, and they're worse off than even second-class citizens.
Yeah, that's a sad reality, and I think most Marxist historians will say, and there is a little bit truth in that, that those were different times, but saying that there were other regimes who were more tolerant. Maharaja Ranjit Singh's regime was very tolerant. Akbar's own regime was very tolerant. So there were regimes even in those times who were tolerant and they were far-sighted. So I think it's more about that how the martyrdom of Guru Sahib was dismissed as well. There is no contemporary source, and when Professor Audrey quotes a source, she quotes a source which was written about 103 or 110 years after the martyrdom. She didn't. That was, I think, she was being lazy. She didn't. She could have just picked up the work of Jaluna Sarkar, who's very well regarded, or some of the contemporary Muslim Aurangzeb sources. I mean, Samard, the Armenian saint, he was also executed by Aurangzeb. I mean,
Right.
how did Aurangzeb treated his father and his brothers compared to other Mughal emperors? Yeah.
And I suppose when you look at it, so the Shahidi of Guru Tegh Bahadur, which is quite a poignant event in Sikhi as well, this occurs in 1675 in Delhi.
Yes.
And the earliest source we have, because first let's just deal with the non-Sikh sources, the earliest source we have which actually mentions this, because just a note, there might be other sources out there which still have to be discovered, which are from probably a nearer
True.
period.
True.
But almost 8 years later, we have the Padishahi Burunji, which is written in 1682. So,
Yes.
what is the Padishahi Burunji and what does it say?
Pasha Buranji are basically the official chronicles of Assam. So
Yep.
they were the scrolls, chronicles written by people of official documentation, like the royal the royal house of Assam, and they have been written continuously from the 13th century onwards. So the source we have over there, so they are contemporary source. So yes, from a if you just scratch the surface, one can say, well, they were not present over there, but they knew what official circles were trying to say, And it makes reference to the arrest of Guru Sahib in 1665, which is very interesting as well, because Guru Sahib's martyrdom happened in 1675. So 10 years prior to the martyrdom, according to this source, he was arrested. And again, this book, if memory serves me right, this book was probably published, the English translation of this book was published around in 1940s. So just 1 or 2 years before the partition of India, or a couple of years after it. So Professor Fauja Singh in 1975 was the first Sikh historian to quote it. So again, what I'm trying to say is that this is in public domain for more than 75, 80 years, and in Sikh circles for more than 50 years. But still, this source was not used by Professor Audrey.
So, does the Padshah Brunji in itself? So, first we have Guru Tegh Bahadur being arrested before his execution, almost 10 years before, and you can see that Aurangzeb is quite agitated, quite concerned that, Guru Harkrishan never agreed with me. I was never able to enforce him to do anything. Now, suddenly they have this new Guru who is actually a warrior, and he is the son of Guru Hargobind, who actually defeated us on so many occasions. So, obviously, there's a fear in his mind, and he orders the Guru's arrest. Now, under what circumstances was the Guru then released if he was, so dangerous to the state?
Yes, Pacha Buranji gives the information that Raja Ram Singh of Amber or Jaipur was asked to arrest the Guru. And now Raja Ram Singh is the same person who has allegedly also let Shivaji, the Maratha, he let him off. So basically, so you have a person, probably you can say, who's sympathetic to non-Muslims. So he went to Guru Sahib and he brought him to his palace as an honored guest. One has to understand that the stature of Guru Sahib was very prominent among non-Muslims. The house of Guru Nanak had been preaching in a vast area across from, you can say, from Bengal to Kabul to Kashmir to the south. So the stature was very high. And after keeping him as an honored guest, Raja Ram Singh bid goodbye to him and let him go. And when Aurangzeb asked him, well, why did you let him go? So, well, he's a saintly man. So I let him go and say, well, and he is not a Raja or a Nawab, and he is not worthy of an emperor's vengeance. And he is just a fakir. So I didn't let him escape. People, if we do anything to such a fakir, people will laugh at us that, well, we are accusing him of something. So in a way, in a smart way, I think he gave an explanation to Aurangzeb. And although Aurangzeb was not happy, but as you can say, in the whole darbar that was saying, was a fakir, I let him go. He stayed with me for a few days. I could see, well, he's not worthy of our attention or our least of our vengeance. So that's what it says. And this thing has been reported in Sikh manuscripts as well, but they haven't given a date or a year for it. They seem to club it around the time of the martyrdom.
Right, which in itself is quite confusing. But do you think that Aurangzeb actually just decided to let the Guru go and agree with Ram Singh at the end of the day because he didn't want to really, focus on too many problems?
Yes, I think one needs to probably search a little bit further that in 1665, what was happening in the Mughal court and those kind of things. And I think also probably Aurangzeb might have felt that I don't have enough reason to take it further. And also that one has to think that the house of Jaipur, at that time it was called Amber, had been allies, a key allies since of Mughal Empire since the days of Akbar. So the whatever Raja Ram Singh said carried some weight, and I think there may have been some opinion among the, at least among the non-Muslim courtiers of Aurangzeb, that well, he's a saint, he's a fakir. So why are we troubling him? Because although you mentioned about the wars, the battles which he fought as a Guru's son, but that was during Guru Har Gobind Sahib's Guruship. In Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib's Guruship, or since the days of Guru Har Gobind Sahib, no battle or war had been fought with anybody. So, yeah, I mean, this point is worth exploring, because that what were the circumstances which may have led him to probably concentrate on some other issues rather than this one. Yeah.
And one thing you see around this time is that even though the House of Umber is maybe a bit prominent at the court, their influence is being decreased. And as Jadunath Sarkar points out, that Aurangzeb kept the Hindus he actually needed for state administration. He tried keeping them in good humor. Even non-Hindus who were non-Muslims particularly, only the bare few skeleton cabinets he needed, but all the others were either being forced to convert to Islam or leave the imperial court straight away. So these were very dark times, and there is a letter from a Rajput Vakil to the House of Umber and Baba Banda Singh Bahadur's time, which does mention that Guru Tegh Bahadur actually accompanied Raja Ram Singh to Assam because Ram Singh did actually request the Guru's assistance. So you can see that the House of Umber was somehow indebted to the House of Guru Nanak, and they did come in swinging for the Guru. And maybe Aurangzeb felt that, the Sikhs have cooled down, let him go. What's our problem with him? We will deal with him later. So that's the Padashahi Burunji, which is 1682. Now, the next source we have is actually from a bit later period, but 1695. This is the Khulasat at-Tariq of Sujan Rai Pandari. Now, we know that Pandari was a clerk at Delhi. He's originally from Batala in Punjab, but he was a clerk at Delhi. So most likely, Pandari was probably an eyewitness, given that he writes about Shah Jahan as well, and he's very detailed, which sort of indicates he was an eyewitness. He writes about Aurangzeb as well, the Shahidi of Guru Tegh Bahadur. So this is someone with access to very high level, Mughal personalities and records concerning historical events. But there's a strange thing about his record, which is he doesn't mention why the Shahidi occurred.
Right. Okay, couple of things about Sujan Rai's account. That this account is very well regarded, and it talks about the economy, the social life, the geography, and the way he describes Punjab. And he says the Lahore province is my Punjab, the most beautiful. It's a very nostalgic account of the province of Punjab, and the level of detail is extraordinarily accurate. If you read his account closely, there are only two things he have mentioned about Aurangzeb. One is the martyrdom of Guru Sahib, and other is the destruction of Mathura temple. And those are the only two political things he has mentioned. Yes, he has not mentioned the circumstances of Guru's martyrdom, but as a matter of fact, he has given a statement that Aurangzeb executed, martyred Guru Sahib. It was not a political account. I don't know if your viewers or your listeners are aware that Aurangzeb did not authorize anybody to write his official history. It was his perception that it was against Islam, or probably not of a worthy venture. So we have somebody who has, and imagine, Amarjeet, that if he had said, well, Aurangzeb did very bad and he killed a saintly person, that could have some consequences. He could have been captured and killed. So we have to understand that these writers in those era had some limitation. So as a matter of fact, he has simply said, on this year, the Guru Sahib was asked to come to Delhi, and he was executed. That's what he says. And but in academic circles, this account is very well regarded. And Gyani Gyan Singh, when he writes in 1880s, he's aware of these Sultanite Pandari's account. So this is very well regarded, and it was translated by Jaduna Sarkar in 1930s or 40s. Yeah.
And I believe one thing which we also need to consider down here, which is very important, is that books, accounts of Khulasat at-Tariq's nature, where it's so comprehensive. These were rarely ever produced on the subcontinent, and if they were actually intended for imperial eyes, so imperial officers, governors, high-ranking individuals close to the emperor. So it does sort of, explain why he couldn't have mentioned Guru Tegh Bahadur Shidi, because who knows, maybe Aurangzeb did read this himself.
True. That could be true, because his account is more about, it's a very beautiful account. It's an account about the different subas, the different provinces in India, what their economy is, what are their heritage sites, religious sites, their rivers, their mountains, the geography of it. So, and you see, he is, during this era, he's not the only one. There are other Hindus who have written in Persian, and I think they probably might have written because by this time people might have realized that, okay, Aurangzeb has not asked anybody to write history, so people in their own way are recording the events. Yeah.
And interestingly enough, it seems that at the end of the day, that Pandari's account actually manages to convey more than what Pandari actually writes in the account. The silence conveys more than what the words do. And
Exactly.
yep, and this is the beauty of his account, basically, that it does sort of cement the fact that the Guru was executed on Aurangzeb's orders, because if I remember correctly, Jadunath Sarkar actually mentions, based on another contemporary account, that Aurangzeb had finished his work in Hassan Abdal and he had come back to Delhi. So more than likely he was at Delhi when the Guru was executed. And Pandari, with all his access to imperial records, because he was actually based at the Delhi court himself. So this is the first solid account we have which pretty much refutes Truschke's and Islamist claims that the Guru was never executed by Aurangzeb in Delhi.
Yes, I mean, even if we say, well, he was a Munshi in Batara, or Munshi in Mughal court in Punjab. The fact is that he was present in Punjab, Delhi, when Guru Sahib was martyred, and he knew it, and hence he wrote about it. If you read his couple of lines he wrote about the martyrdom, one can read between the lines and say, well, he doesn't tell you why the Guru Sahib was executed. And one can see, well, if a criminal is executed, the manuscript writer would have written that due to this reason he was executed by the emperor. So obviously, probably we being a Sikh are trying to read a little bit more into it, but on the other extreme, people who are probably pro Aurangzeb, they will say, no, there's nothing written in it. But it is a contemporary source. He was well aware of it. A, a great saint from the house of Guru Nanak, who had been preaching in this region for over 150 years, close to 200 years, had been martyred by the Mughal government. It was a big news. People can't, and it was because he has written an account on Punjab and there's an account on the Sikhs. So he has mentioned few details about each guru. Obviously, the closer he comes to his own time, the accuracy of details becomes bigger and larger.
Yep. And now we move on to the second account, which is again another contemporary Persian account. This individual was probably most likely, well, not probably, but was actually present at the Mughal court and most likely did see the execution. This is the Nuskha-e-Dil Kusha, which is written in 1709 as a memoir, and it is actually written by the Rajput commander Bhim Sen, who himself was a general at the Delhi court, and he actually served under Dalpat Rao Bundela, one of the few Hindu generals
Yeah.
which actually survived Aurangzeb's purges. And Bundela fell at the Battle of Jajua in 1707, where Guru Gobind Singh Ji was also fighting. So Bhim Sen met Guru Gobind Singh Ji, but he also writes about Guru Tegh Bahadur Shidi in relation to Guru Gobind Singh Ji. So his account is very important because it mentions more of a political reason, which does have a grain of religious reason, but more or less he mentions that people had started seeing Guru Tegh Bahadur as a parallel authority to to Aurangzeb.
Yes, I mean both Surjendra Pandari and Bhim Sen were moving within the official Mughal circles, so they were part and parcel of uh, the ruling elite in a way. So yes, and well, Bhim Sen simply states that the Guru Sahib was called Padshah by his followers, and when the news was conveyed to the Aurangzeb, he ordered that he should be brought to the court, and when he was brought to the court, he was executed. So again, so in a way, Bhim Sen, if again, how I would read it, Bhim Sen, well, on a flimsy ground, the Mughal emperor executed the saint. That's how I would read it. Yeah.
So basically, once again, what's not said is actually indicating more than what is being said down there.
Exactly. I mean, coming back to the same point that if you openly criticize the ruling elite, even your own, the Bundela chief, he would not have liked that. Well, we don't need to get into trouble with Aurangzeb, but you can still convey the same message by carefully picking and choosing your words. Yeah. And what's that? That's what Bhim Sen and Sujana Pandari did.
And one thing I'd like to mention here before moving on to the third account is that just because these records were completed on a particular date does not mean that they were started on that date or that year. They could have been started many years before.
In those times, people would take years to complete their manuscript, because the reason I say that is some of the accounts which we have in that era have in fact dates. Well, I started this account on this date, and in the end they've written that on this date I have completed this account. So usually it is over a period of good few years, not months, good few years. Yeah.
Right. And now the third account we come to is a bit more interesting because this account really is I mean, you can use it as a pro Aurangzeb account, but at the same time, this account is very anti Aurangzeb in a way as well. Now, I'm just trying to find a way to convey this, but this account actually is the Masar-e Alamgiri. Now, this is written in 1710. It's the unofficial history of Aurangzeb's last 30 years as emperor. So basically, what Muhammad Saki Mustad Khan, who's actually the author, he says that Aurangzeb had actually ordered the cessation, basically, that the production of detailed records had to be stopped because, well, they didn't have computers back then. So you had 1,000 scribes working away day and night to record all the events which were happening. But Muhammad Saki Mustad Khan mentions that the economic state of the empire was so grim that Aurangzeb actually started laying off staff. So this
Yes.
meant that all these detailed records had to be stopped from being produced in those last several years. But nonetheless, some private individuals kept doing what they were doing, and based on their records, he's actually building up this Masari Alamgiri. Now, while he doesn't actually mention that Guru Tegh Bahadur was executed, martyred, he doesn't mention anything besides Aurangzeb specifically. He does mention that Aurangzeb, basically in a fit of religious fervor, ordered the destruction of all non-Islamic places of worship.
Yeah, true.
And it does mention that, special centers were set up for infidels where public officials who were actually appointed as, I would say Iran's morality police, dragged infidels, their women, their children into these centers and tried brainwashing them to believe in Islam. And Masari Alamgiri, I mean, it does have that celebratory tone that, well, look, it's the triumph of Islam, but it does actually add to her case because it does mention that the destruction of these temples was on an industrial scale. Basically, all non-Muslim places of worship were destroyed on a very high industrial scale.
Yes, I mean, in that era, there was a totally ban on making new places of worship, total ban on repairing the existing ones as well. So they took another step. At the smallest pretext, they would take down any non Muslim place of worship. So the pretext could be as simple as tax not paid or local dispute. So at the smallest pretext, they would raise the non-Muslim place of worship. That is a reality. Yeah.
I think based on this Alamgiri, Masari Alamgiri, Jadunath Sarkar actually calculated that by 1668, when Aurangzeb actually banned Hindu fairs and marketplaces, this actually cut off a massive, substantial amount of revenue which they could otherwise have collected just to keep Delhi going for decades on their own. But they just didn't see it that way. And this destruction was augmented by the fact that, basically, if I can quote Dr. Main Khalid Al-Quda, who on July 22nd, 2007, in the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America, this is something he said, and this does explain Aurangzeb's mentality. Their belief is that Islam is the final divine religion, and this supersedes all other divine religions, and that all other religions are abrogated by the prophethood of their prophet. So, in another word, after the fact that their prophet has taught what he has done, no one has the right to remain in their religion. So basically, Aurangzeb, the way he saw it, was he was stopping the oppression of disbelief and, being a good fanatic, as he felt, by doing what he was doing down here. And this is what the Masari Alamgiri celebrates. And there is no reason to believe that he made any exception for Sikh Gurdwaras.
No. So I think for them, all non-Muslims were kafir, especially the ones who were not mentioned in Quran. So all Indian non-Muslims were dubbed as Buddh-parast. Buddh-parast, basically idol worshippers. Although Sikhs do not worship idols, but in their terminology, because they were non-Muslims, they were kafirs. So a harsh treatment is justified. And that's a fundamentalist interpretation of Islam, sadly, which is in some circles and still going on.
Yep. And so moving on from the Masari Alamgiri, because that does augment the case that there was a widespread destruction of all non-Muslim places of worship, we come to 1719. Now, this is the Ibratnama of Muhammad Qasim. Now,
Yes.
again, just like the other Persian sources, it's not what he says, but what he does not say, which is quite intriguing. But Qasim was actually a prodigy of the Said brothers at Delhi, but he was himself based at Lahore. So he's actually quite high in the Mughal hierarchy. Like, you know,
Yes.
just like Bhimsen and Bhandari, he was actually, privy to secret channels. You know, he used to have a lot of intelligence couriers around him. So while his chronology is a bit shady, his narrative otherwise is very authentic. And he's actually one of the first Persian authors to imply that, in his eyes, Guru Tegh Bahadur was a martyr for the faith.
Yes, I find this one to be most interesting simply because written by a Muslim shortly after Aurangzeb's death, and he clubs Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib as a martyr, and he also puts Samrad, the Armenian saint fakir, who was executed by Aurangzeb, in the same category. So yeah, this is a very interesting, very interesting account for me. Yeah.
And once again, he's quite. And you can read that at that time, many Muslims must have felt, well, a certain section that, look, what the hell? We shouldn't have done this. And you can see that the same attitude which Qasim has actually filters down to even Bulle Shah, who actually called Guru Tegh Bahadur the true Ghazi of the righteous faith, the true
Yeah.
warrior of faith.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I mean, Bulle Shah was also, I mean, in addition to, yes, he is widely sung even today in Pakistan by on this side as well, because his Punjabi poetry is of a later date and quite, it is not very onerous to even non-Punjabi speakers. So, but he was quite controversial in his times as well, by because he used to question all these things, and he did call the Guru Sahib a Ghazi, a religious warrior. So imagine those who are suggesting that, well, no, he was not martyred. He he takes it further and calls him Ghazi. I mean, I have been told that in his a few years after his death, his grave was vandalized by the extremist. I'm talking about Baba Bulisha. So, but by quoting Amarjit, by quoting all these accounts, we are building a picture that first there are several accounts. Secondly, one should be a little bit careful, read these accounts carefully to understand what the person is trying to say. Read between the lines, as they say.
Yep. And you do get the impression that Qasim, whatever his time, must have actually wept when he saw Aurangzeb order this execution at the end of the day. You get this sense of fatality from what he writes, that basically he's resigned himself to the fate which, as we know, eventually befell the Mughals at the hands of the Khalsa.
Yes, I mean, his account was written or completed in 1719. So by this time, Banda Bahadur had been executed, and his Sikhs have been, so Sikhs are being deemed as outcasts, fit to be killed. But despite that, his account is sympathetic. He treats Guru Sahib as a martyr. So in a way, he's critical of Aurangzeb. When you are saying
But
that the person killed by the emperor is a martyr, so clearly the killer or executor can't be a good person, isn't it?
yes, right.
And
So
all these accounts which we have discussed now, not single of one has been mentioned by our esteemed professor Audrey.
I am not sure if she's going to listen to this, but I sure as hell would hope that at least her readers listen to this to form a very impartial picture.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, the fifth account we have is again from 1719. So, remembering that basically that just because the account is finished on a certain date does not imply it was, started on that date. This is the Kalimat-i-Tayyibat. Now, this is actually quite important because this is actually a pseudo-religious chronology compiled by Naqshbandi Sufi fanatic Mirza Mazhar Jane Janan. And even though he's born after Guru Tegh Bahadur Shidi, being a Naqshbandi, which was the same, the forerunner of Deoband and we can say the fanatical strain of Islam being followed by Al-Qaeda and many other groups today. So Mirza Mazhar Jane Janan, his father was a high-ranking functionary because he was a Naqshbandi. Aurangzeb was a Naqshbandi. So Mirza had access to his father's memoirs and, the other court officials of Aurangzeb. So now Mirza does not mention the ninth Guru's martyrdom explicitly. He, however, celebrates Aurangzeb's destruction of non-Islamic places of worship. So
Yeah.
one part of his account is particularly important because it highlights what was happening at the time. And it sort of relates to Bhimsen's account because Bhimsen mentioning the Guru as an alternative source of authority, it's almost logical that the Guru would have been armed and, ready to confront Aurangzeb if it came to a physical clash. So what the Kalimat-i-Tayyibat does is it provides a rationale for why the Sikhs would have decided to arm themselves anyhow, which is that Aurangzeb actually specifically targeted Sikh Gurdwaras. So either the Gurdwaras were destroyed or turned into mosques. And he mentions that this was done because the Sikhs were infidels. They were not willing to submit to Islam. And one of the things he actually mentions is that, if I remember correctly, if this is his account, is that there was a Said who was actually made the head of a Gurdwara at Sirhind. So this Gurdwara at Sirhind was destroyed, a mosque built in its place. The Said, who was a descendant of Prophet Muhammad, was made its head, but two Sikhs came and assassinated the Said. And Mirza actually mentions that these were common incidents with the Sikhs, that two Sikhs would come and just slay the Qazi and be done with it.
Yeah, I mean, from a Sikh point of view, I'm not justifying any killing, but from a Sikh point of view, well, you destroyed our place of worship and build your own, so we are justified in doing and taking the remedial action. Obviously, in those times, if the government itself is doing these things, who do you go to redress your grievances? So
Right.
yes, but it points, it builds the picture at what kind of regime Aurangzeb was running. How was his government, and all this uh, notion that he was not a bad ruler. Well, he was the ruler of his own times, but none of these acts. He took fascism, extremism, fundamentalism to the extreme end compared to his ancestors and other rulers which came after him.
And basically, after this, now we come to an even more important source, which is again, says more than it lets on. This is the Akam-e-Alamgiri. Again, it's a 1719 conclusion date. Now, it's author Mirza Inayat Ullah Khan. He was a
Yes.
personal teacher to Aurangzeb's daughter and Aurangzeb's own secretary. So now he doesn't mention the ninth Guru's martyrdom, but he does mention the same specific policy. He actually signals out that Aurangzeb had a special pathological hatred reserved for Sikhs. In his eyes, being a Sikh was the greatest sin of the Gurus and Sikhs in total, and the way he set about to punish them was almost to erase the name of Sikhs from history.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's and it should be, and it all adds to the picture. And the good thing is, it is a contemporary source. Yeah.
Yep. So this is actually in the hands of a man who might have actually even conveyed Aurangzeb's order to the commanders that this is what we have to do about the Sikhs.
Yeah, I mean, and this is similar kind of issue arises when we read the accounts of Mahmud Ghaznavi. So I'm slightly digressing that he destroyed a lot of uh, Hindu mandirs. Marxists will say, well, it is because of they had a lot of money, gold, and he was after money. Well, he specifically raised them to the ground and used that he's being a mujahid and he has a right. He said he wants to be known as an idol breaker. And if you read the contemporary accounts, they justify his action and they tell. Some of them certainly criticize him, but many of them justify him, saying they were kafirs, so that needs to be done. So same thing, you have some accounts which, in a way, are trying to justify the actions of Aurangzeb, but they end up giving us evidence of his fascism as well.
Which only helps us at the end of the day.
To build up a picture, to have an alternative narrative. Yeah.
So number 7 is the Fruxiernaama. Now this we know is started in 1713 and it ends in 1719. Muhammad Ihsan Azad was Emperor Fruxier's official biographer. So first you had Aurangzeb and then you had Bahadur Shah. Then
Yes.
I believe there was Jahandar Shah and then came Fruxier. And now Azad being Fruxier's official biographer, he, in this capability, he had access to a lot of, sources. And he mentions how Aurangzeb ordered Guru Tegh Bahadur arrested, fearing his stature as an alternative power to the Mughals. So he actually clarifies that Aurangzeb felt that, if, you know, people are not happy with me, they can turn to Tegh Bahadur straight away. He can become the new emperor. So Asan mentions how the order for Guru Tegh Bahadur's arrest was kept a secret. Now, this is important because Aurangzeb would have known that if these arrest orders are made public, there can be a massive war on my hands straight away.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that if we read the Mughal history, Aurangzeb history carefully, he he led quite a few of his powerful Hindu rajas to battles which eventually killed them. So historians have mentioned that it was a win-win situation from him. Quite a few of them were sent to Assam. Assam, obviously at that time, Manipur, Meghalaya, all those states which are now called Seven Sisters came under Assam as well. So they were always reigning. So you had, and the local terrain was such difficult uh, for an outsider to comprehend that half of the battle was with the terrain and half with the opposite army. So in Aurangzeb's mind, it was a win-win situation. If he gets new territory, it's a victory for the Mughal Empire. If the Hindu Raja gets killed, and with him the Rajputs had died anyway, few less Kafirs, although they might be with the Mughal army. Some may not like this analysis, but that's what I can. If I if I have time, I can quote some of the historians have suggested that. So so
Which
so so
is
he founded ways to meddle or basically how to kill, destroy any alternative uh, non-Muslim journal leader. Yeah.
I suppose if Aurangzeb did ever write a book, it would be called How to Be a Political Bastard 101 Rules to Success. But moving on from there.
No, you see, the thing is that, I mean, the good thing about you, Amarjit, you have been trying to build up a picture, trying to say that this was his political philosophy, and here are the sources. That's how you're building it up. And I think what Dr. Audrey, Professor Audrey has done is she has basically, it's like a propaganda book, unfortunately. That you all wrong, basically, he was not that bad, Aurangzeb. So it was a big propaganda. So if one looks at the source, who's giving uh, the donations to that particular university or that department, or I don't know, probably she feels, Professor Audrey feels that way. But yes, I mean,
So
it's a well
yeah.
established fact that Aurangzeb fascism led to the collapse of Mughal Empire. Yeah.
Oh yes, obviously, because I mean, yes, the Masari Alamgiri pretty much points that out. I mean, they were writing basically when they could see that the empire was going to hell. So yes, that's one proverbial fact. And now Nama also says something else, that the Guru was apprehended opportunistically near Sirhind. That he came near
Yes.
Sirhind and they grabbed him from there straight away.
Yes, it does state that. Yeah.
But then the
So,
fact that
yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
yes. But then the fact that the Sikhs never made any attempt to actually liberate him, and the fact that he had already installed Guru Gobind Rai as the 10th Guru, it does sort of underscore that the Guru coming near Sirhind was also pre-planned on the Guru's part.
He, the way the Sikh chronicles project is that the Guru Sahib was on his way from um, from Punjab to Delhi. So Sirhind was at that time, it was not a Suba, but there was a Faujdar over there. So it was a subdivision. So there was a uh, Faujdar over there. So that the Faujdar said that the Gurus of the Sikhs was moving around, and so uh, I have arrested him, and I'm going to send him to Delhi. Now, were they given orders by the Mughals in Delhi is something one can speculate, but I don't think we have any particular non-Sikh source on this one, that under what circumstances and what was the reason, because clearly there was nothing Guru Sahib did in Sirhind which warranted a arrest.
Mm-hmm. So the eighth source after the Nama, which actually mentions this now, is 1722, Muntakhab ul Labab by Kafi Khan, or Muhammad Hashim, which was his other name. Now, he was
Yes.
actually one of Aurangzeb's chief functionaries, and he's writing in 1722 as a sort of a biography. And this was someone who, even though he had retired from the court, he still had access to the fast decentralizing court. So he is a bit sympathetic to the Sikhs, and while he's not entirely in agreement with Aurangzeb's policies, he does indicate that religious reasons were more prominent than political reasons in Aurangzeb's specific persecution of the Sikhs. Gurdwaras were destroyed, preachers killed, and they were forced to convert to Islam, and their gurus didn't, and that's why they were persecuted.
Yes, yeah, and I think this is also a good source, as you say. Um, he he in a way justifies the actions taken by Aurangzeb, but he ends up giving us a precious evidence that how it was not like a big bang that, okay, Guru Sahib, you have done that, I'm going to execute you. The policy that he says from the olden times, they will have built temples in towns and populous places, basically dharmshalas or gurdwaras, and they have appointed one of their followers. So he's talking about Masans, and they collect money from them. Yeah, all the offerings were collected by the Masans and deposited at Kiratpur Sahib, or Anandpur later on. So again, written very few years after the death of Aurangzeb, and now by this time, the last few accounts they have been in a way official accounts of Muslims. They were all Muslim. They're all Muslim accounts, and they are written by people who have access to. They move in the political circles, Muslim political Mughal circles. Yeah.
Mm. And now we come to Sikh sources, which can be considered as being contemporary. So, to name a few, there is the 1698 Shri Guru Katha of Bhai Jeevan Singh Shahid, who we know brought Guru Tegh Bahadur's head back from Delhi. So he mentions that the Guru died because Jeevan Singh writes in a var. So basically, the whole government, the whole state structure is evil. He doesn't specifically mention Aurangzeb, but the other two sources which I'm about to mention, they do explicitly cite Aurangzeb. So the first is the Patwahiya, which
Yes.
do mention that Kashmiri Pandits came to meet Guru Tegh Bahadur, and they don't say that they were the only reason that Guru Tegh Bahadur decided to go for Shahidi, but it does sort of give us an impression of what the times were like.
The Patwahis are. It's very interesting that one of the Hindu nationalists who confronted me on the social media was a Pardwaj.
Yep.
He said all those Pats whose banis are written in Guru Granth Sahib were all Hindus, because and Pats were Brahman. Fair enough, they could have been Brahmins. But when I quoted him that the Patwa, he clearly states that Guru's Kashmiri Pandits came to Guru Sahib, and it's not one Patwahi, so which has been referred by a number of Patwahis. And he didn't have a clue what to say, because I said, well, are you questioning your own ancestors? And no, we need to understand they were basically the scroll writers, and they used to write. They were sitting in Hardwar, Pohawa, and other religious places. Pohawa is not just near Kurukshetra in Haryana. So those two places, people would go. Let me explain how it used to be.
Yep.
At the birth of the child, the person used to go for pilgrimage, and they used to meet their family pandit sitting over there, who's the pandit
Right.
of. So although I'm using the word pandit, he's permanently based in Hardwar, Pohawa, or any other religious place. So he's over there at the banks of the holy river, or whichever river. And you used to go to your family pandit or line of pandit, and if the pandit had died by the time since you last came, his son invariably would be sitting on that seat. So you would tell them, okay, this is what has happened. My son, or I had a grandson, that's his name, that's his date of birth, this person has passed away. So, and he would do the shad and all the rituals for them, but also note down it. But for rich people, little bit rich people, they would sometimes also come on special occasion to their patron, in a way. So for most people, for the patron, they would come, and they would once or twice a year they would come and note down everything, and bakshish they would get it. Now with Guru Sahibs, because again one needs to understand that the stature of the house of Guru Nanak was very high. So all those people who used to come to them, they would ask, especially in around Punjab, who used to come to them, have you heard anything about the Guru Sahib? Had you heard any update on, please give me any update on Guru Sahib? So whatever people have told them after a month or 2 months after the incident, or sometimes even few days after the incident, they would have noted down. So one can say, well, they were not there themselves, but we are not talking about 50 years after they when they're writing it. They're writing about the event after few weeks. So with Guru Sahib, none of them came to them to say, okay, come on, guys, you write about this is my family. Similarly, there is little evidence that they also went to Guru Sahib. But saying that, because the parts also we need to understand that they wrote in Braj, which is like a variant of Hindi in layman term, but they wrote in Gurmukhi script. So some of these parts were also living in Punjab as well. So they had a huge interest in noting down. In fact, I mean, imagine a country or a province, say Punjab, I don't copy India, which has been under a foreign rule for 1,000 years. The Guru Sahib gave that ray of hope, and that house of Guru Nanak had been there for 200 years. So there was always a reason for them to note down the specific uh, details about them. So the Guru Ki Sakhiyan, which was compiled in 1790, which was copied from the original source, whose date we don't know, has dates, has years on number of events, and they are very, very consistent to, except for very few, they are very consistent to the Sikh tradition, and remarkably so. One is amazed that, okay, the tradition is not far off to what we have been told. So they are also very good source. That's what I was trying to, so sorry, Amarji, I was trying to explain to your listeners that what are these sources here.
Right. So then we have the Shri Gur Soba, which is
Yeah.
1701, because what Wahia are contemporary, but
Hmm.
obviously we don't really have an exact date due to the nature of how they were compiled, but they are around from that period. 1701 is the Shri Gur Soba. Now, that is the belief of the, I believe, current edition by Professor Kulwant Singh. I might be wrong there, but again, Kavi Senapati, its author, is actually a contemporary. He does mention that Guru Tegh Bahadur died for religious and political freedoms and the
Hmm.
rights of people to assemble together and express dissent against their rulers. So basically, if they're not happy with their rulers, they can convey to their rulers why they're not happy. So that's what the Shri Gur Soba says. So far, three
Yeah,
Sikh.
I mean,
Yep,
yeah. Sorry, Amarji, just one observation. Dr.
yep,
Kulwant Singh has done the English translation of Shri Guru Sobha,
right.
and prior to that, it was edited by quite a few people. About 50 years ago by Professor Ganda Singh and I think Shamsher Singh Shok as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So it's a very intriguing source, but it mentions Guru Tegh Bahadur Shahidi, and it also mentions that in context that this Shahidi was not seen as something new by the Sikhs. It was, perceived and believed to be the outcome of what the Guru was doing. So basically, Sikhs could understand straight away that what the Guru did was in line with Sikhi and the Sikhs' right to sovereignty.
Yes. I mean, I think because the gurus were called Sache Patsha. So this allegation was also used against the fifth Guru, Guru Arjan Dev Sahib Ji,
Yep.
when he was martyred. So Sacha Patsha means the true king, the true emperor. Patsha, Badshah is the same thing. So Sacha means true. So obviously Akbar didn't had an issue with that, but obviously Aurangzeb felt, okay, you are true, then I am false. Well, yes, you are a false king anyway. So and so by this time, at least I mean, pe- people have enough. There's a theory. I think Professor Vedya mentioned in Professor Vedya. He wrote about history of medieval Hindu India. He wrote few volumes. I think he wrote in 1930s or 40s. He said, when people's religion is attacked and the food, and they are out of food, then they will rebel. Then they will rebel. So the reason you didn't had a mass rebel movements prior to Aurangzeb was they may have been some attack on religions, but they were usually fewer, but they were also during the wartime on pretext was given. Also, there were there was no starvation or heavy taxation on people, so that they live on a poverty line, and when there's a little bit problem, there's a starvation. So basically, people were being forced to die of hunger or die fighting. So we had Satnami revolt, Satnamis who were like farmers in near Greater Delhi in the present Haryana. So we had the revolt from the Sikhs. We have Marathas in the Deccan. So there were a number of communities which revolted against, who were being persecuted, and they revolted.
And then, even though there is controversy over these sources, there is the Bachitra Natak, there is the Bansavali Nama, there is the Gurbilasa. There we have these sources which basically around that time, within 10 to 20 years, are pretty much, mentioning what the Persian sources are mentioning and confirming that Guru Tegh Bahadur was executed by Aurangzeb. And Sir Jadunath Sarkar is actually arguing that Aurangzeb was actually present in Delhi when Guru Tegh Bahadur was martyred. And I believe Dr. Hariram Gupta actually says that, because I remember Patwant Singh also references this in his book on Maharaja Ranjit Singh, that Aurangzeb actually sent his Naqshbandi, Sufi clerics to convince Guru Tegh Bahadur to become Muslim. And Guru Tegh Bahadur refused and actually wrote a letter to Aurangzeb saying that the man you call prophet failed to make the entire world Muslim, so how can you make me a Muslim?
Yes, that's a very interesting observation. But again, if I don't know if what source Jadunath Sarkar has used, but the fact is Jadunath Sarkar has done the maximum work on Aurangzeb. So you cannot dismiss him in any way. I mean, nobody comes even closer to him in terms of the in-depth work he has done on Aurangzeb before. And the beauty of it is he also covered the final few years of Shah Jahan. So he has started when Aurangzeb became one of the Subedars. So he was still a prince, but Subedar of the province. So he starts his history from there and ends it with the later Mughals, basically telling us the consequences of that how a fundamentalist, fascist, and discriminatory rule of Aurangzeb led to the fall of Mughal Empire. So, yeah. So, although we are talking about a source which we don't know, but the fact that it is coming from such esteemed historians should carry some weight, like Jadunath Sarkar and Hariram Gupta.
And I suppose because Sarkar has done such extensive, truthful work on Aurangzeb, that's why he's hated the most as well.
Well, you can hate him, but you can't ignore him. Yes, I have noticed that among the few, quite a few so-called leftist or Marxist historian, they seem to dislike Jadunath Sarkar. But well, even they are using his translations,
I
unless they know
mean,
Farsi. Yeah,
after 80 to 90 years, no one has been able to refute him.
no, no. And so it's like a bitter truth. He's telling us, he's sharing a bitter truth with us. We don't like the truth, but that doesn't change the truth. That's
Yep,
the
that's
beauty of
right.
truth. And Satya.
Satya, yep. So now we come to the source where the problem is, where we can say the paha starts. and this is the Siyar al-Matkarin. Now, this is written in 1782. So, William Irwin, he studied it. He dismissed its narration of Guru Tegh Bahadur Shiti as being nothing more than fiction. Dr. Ganda Singh and Sardar Kapoor Singh. So this is when Sardar Kapoor Singh was in the UK during his student days. He actually, as well as Dr. Ganda Singh, they reviewed the original in Persian, and they actually clarify something which even Irwin didn't clarify, because Irwin dismissed it straight away. He basically said this account is 101% rubbish. I'm not going to use it. But what
Yes.
Dr. Ganda Singh and Sardar Kapoor Singh did was they reviewed the original in Persian and compared it with the English translation. So what the Siyar al-Matkarin, its author Ghulam Hussain, says is that spies wrote to Aurangzeb that Guru Tegh Bahadur had an army and was gathering money from non-Muslims. Then on another page he writes that Adam Hafiz has an army and is gathering money from the Muslims. But the translation, which is made by Raymond and Briggs, two soldiers serving in the East India Company, actually conflates it to the point it says that Guru Tegh Bahadur and Adam Hafiz have joined together, they have an army, and they subsist on rapine and plunder. So basically, this account is Audrey Truschke's, and as well as many Islamists, main account to disparage the Guru with.
Yes. I mean, the thing is that the problem I have with this account is that you have ignored that quite a few historians, modern historians, have ignored all the accounts which we have discussed now, till now, the Persians one and the Sikh sources, and have used this account written in 1782, about 107 years after the martyrdom. And then they have used the incorrect translation as well. Hafiz Adam was a contemporary of Shah Jahan, and Professor Ganda Singh, Fauja Singh have given 5-6 Persian sources that Hafiz Adam was banished by Shah Jahan and sent to Mecca for the things, the looting and other things which he have been doing in that era. So basically, what this historian has done is he has confused, Ghulam Hussain has confused things. Now, Hariram Gupta has given a very good reason. He said, well, he was based in Western UP and Sikhs were basically getting Rakhi, the tax, the security tax from that area. They were crossing Yamuna, and this was the Misl period when they were all powerful, and Zabita Khan and Rohillas who were the patrons of Ghulam Hussain in some extent, and so he had a personal grudge against Sikhs. So he basically he didn't have anything nice to say about the Sikhs. And so I think there is some merit in what Dr. Gupta is saying.
And one interesting thing is that this account, the Siyar al-Matkarin, made its way to Warren Hastings. And Hastings actually asked George Forster to submit a report on what he felt Hussain was saying. And Forster actually traveled throughout the Punjab and North India, and he reported back that he could locate no evidence of any crime for which Guru Tegh Bahadur was actually executed. So he's saying that Guru Tegh Bahadur is executed, but there is no evidence for whatever crime he did, what Ghulam Hussain is doing. And Gupta says that Hastings actually accepted Forster's words and just treated Hussain with a lot of caution.
And this guy has been quoted by Professor Audrey. So I think the listeners could understand that why are we doing this episode?
I mean,
she has ignored all the sources which have discussed now, but she has quoted Siaru Maksurin. Yeah.
It seems to me that, I mean, one of the things which I've actually learned from Dr. Balwant Singh Tillo is that the best method of studying history is what has been proposed by, E.H. Carr in What is History. And Carr basically says that first you study who the historian is, then you study the times in which the text was produced, and then, the internal evidence of the text. Now, interestingly enough, what I'm finding is that with Audrey Truschke, there is no commitment to this process. There is no impartiality. Basically, what it is that she's starting from a theory. I mean, back in the day, there used to be this criticism of religion that basically religion constructs facts to explain a theory, whereas science constructs theories to explain facts. And
Yeah, yeah, two altogether different fields. Yeah. Sorry, continue.
yep, and I suppose with Truschke, she's actually trying to construct facts to fit her theory, whereas in reality, whatever she's doing, it doesn't really hold to the ground. Now, I'm not saying that the reaction she received is justifiable in any way, but I mean, even an idiot can see that if you're going to lie so blatantly, so atrociously, that even the source you reference, its author, is actually, disannouncing you, basically denouncing you, saying that you're lying, well, then there has to be a careful scrutiny of what she's doing, and there seems to be no oversight as to what it is she's getting up to.
Yeah, I mean, her people will be reading Jaduna Sarkar in even after 50 years from now, 100 years from now. But I think in next 30 years, this account, the this book written by Professor Audrey will not be read as a source of history. It may be mentioned as a propaganda book, but it, it will die its natural death in academic circles. But I think Sikhs should defend their history, protect their history, because, and I think the good thing is that when we know our history, we are up to the challenge, and there will be challenges in every few years. There will be few challenges because people tend to associate personal differences with the communities. So yeah, so yeah, but I still strongly feel that some university professor in the Western Hemisphere should counter her in a journal article. Yeah.
One other thing I'd add down here, well, two other things, is that first one is that among Sikhs we have, number one is the Paichara people, who are basically like leftist Marxists, which is free speech for them, no free speech for you. You have to tolerate whatever it is they impose on you. So if we get up in Gurdwaras and start discussing these facts, we are basically told we are against Gurmat, we are racist. We are going against oppressed minorities, whatever the hell oppressed minority is in this context today. I don't want to hazard a guess. But from what I understand, if we were to talk about this, we're accused of ruining Paichara, and that's problem number one, that we can't tell the truth even in our own Gurdwaras. Problem number two is the, Boomer Khalistan Brigade, which seems to have this stupidity in its mind that, Pakistan's going to help them, get an independent Sikh state. So most of our history like this is actually elaborately constructed by the RSS. I mean, it's a big stretch of the imagination, but there you go. It exists. And the third one, I suppose, is the upgrades, who are actually saying that all of Sikh history is constructed by pujaris. You got these three problems down here, which are basically disallowing us from exposing the truth.
I think the bottom line is having extremist views and not having a moderate or sensible approach. As you say, you have to understand the history when in the history, understand history in the context. When was it written? What was the time period? What was look at the evidence, the social, uh, the political or the social philosophy of the writer. You have to consider all these things. And luckily, today we have discussed close to, I'm not counting, about 15 sources,
Yeah, I
healthy
believe
mix
it's
of,
around maybe 16, 17 sources.
yeah, 16, 17 sources. So, and a healthy mix of written by Sikh, Hindus, Muslims, and so not all of them can be wrong. And in terms of what I would say is paichara, the paichara, yeah, it is good to have brotherhood feelings, but paichara is usually based on some cultural connection, some similarities in culture. So you will have, we can have some paichara with our fellow Punjabis living in Malerkotla, fellow Punjabis living in West Punjab, as a because we share the Punjabi culture. But if some of them consider Aurangzeb as a very pious Muslims, then obviously on this topic there cannot be any agreement. And why should I refute my own history just to have this so-called brotherhood, which does not even allow to have a healthy dialogue on some of the aspects of the history, and especially on an emperor whose own record, I mean, he persecuted Shia Muslims. He killed his own brothers who were defeated, who were not a threat to him. He imprisoned his father, and he died in that fort prison, living there for the last 7 8 years. So people, he was not faithful to his own family. Forget about being faithful to the religion. Yeah. So coming back to the Paichara thing, it's Paichara is cannot be with the whole 100 million community. We are also 25 million, 25 million
Yes,
Sikhs in the world. So 25 million Sikhs in the world, we will have diverse opinions. We cannot say that all Sikhs are going to have Paichara with Hindus, all Sikhs are going to have Paichara with Muslims. It's not going to work like that. The fact is that we are minority everywhere. So
right,
we have to work and live together with all the other communities, but we have to safeguard our interest as well. And safeguarding our interest also means safeguarding our history. So to, some people may get hurt about it, but the fact is that in 1984 there were about 50 Muslim and Christian MPs in the Indian Parliament. Not a single one of them spoke either when the Barsa was attacked or when Sikhs were killed throughout India after the killing of Indira Gandhi. Not single of them. What paichara are we talking about? Let's be very honest about it that nobody, when you are cornered, nobody comes to your rescue. You have to fight yourselves. We may have political goals. We need to lobby with other communities. Go for it. Do that. I don't have any issues with that. But saying one whole community is our friend and one whole community is our enemy is, it doesn't work like that. We have to be street smart in our dealings. Yeah.
right. And I suppose another thing we can say is that Europe is currently going through a very massive right wing incitement. There's a massive right wing backlash in the works. And we can see that European nations, Western nations, are now coming under right wing political governance. Many right wing politicians are winning. So if they have a problem with a certain community, Sikhs do not necessarily need to get involved being social justice warriors. We just need to stay out of it and defend our heritage and history.
Yes, I mean there is also a theory that why right wings is becoming so popular across the world is that this so-called neo-leftism, neo-secularism, which seems to ignore the fundamentalism among some of the minority religions, has in a way, over a period of time, given an impulse which has helped the right wing. If we are treating everybody equitably and not treating people in vote banks, I tell people, and there is some realization among the intellectuals that yes, Muslims have been used as a vote bank in India, but their socioeconomic parameters, or if you look at their education level, their participation in upper jobs is not very high. But they have, at least during the Congress regimes, they have been able to get what the fundamentalists wanted. So yes, coming back to the point, yes, we charity begins at home. We need to look our community first, then to the so-called supernatural or unnatural paichara. You can't have a paichara. Paichara can be with individuals. I have many good Muslim friends, but I can say they represent all Muslims. No. Similarly, if they have a friend in me, they can't say the whole Sikh community is their friend. Let's put it this way.
Right. And thank you very much for joining us regarding Truschke's mythology, at least. Hopefully she does listen to this and understand that end of the day that it's better to confess, better to admit to a mistake rather than let it grow bigger. It's only for her own betterment, her own academic and professional betterment. I mean, if she does correct it at the end of the day, no one is going to have a problem with her. However, that said, the attacks on her character, her family, her career, that does not really make sense because that has even given her a bigger bump to just go on doing what it is she's doing. So end of the day, hopefully there is some change, but if there isn't, at least people now know that, well, really there is evidence to defend Sikhi and Guru Tegh Bahadur and Guru Tegh Bahadur Shigi from the attacks, directed towards them.
Yes. Yeah. Amarjit, before
Yes.
we end, I want to convey a message to our listeners.
Yep.
That people like you and me were quite keen and interested in Sikh history. We follow it. But at the end of the day, in the eyes of academia, university professors, we are amateurs. So my humble request to all Sikh youth who are greatly interested in Sikh history, who are in their 20s or 30s, to do your masters, bachelor's, masters, and try to become a university professor. Then you can really help us. It will be very easy. It will be very easy for you to get a credibility among that stretch of society. You will walk among university professors. And it will be easy for you to say things which we are trying hard to get our point across simply because we are not a university professor. Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. Until next time, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.